I feel like sometimes Democratic campaigns are too hyper targeted. They're like,
yes,
we
they
only
get too
need to
cute with
talk
it,
to
for
single
sure.
moms that have 3 kids
Yep.
and live like in the exurbs. And I'm like, okay, well, it's 500 people in your
Right. No, we actually we have a like micro targeting like limit. Like you have to, your list needs to be at least 5,000 people. We will not do lists of, a dozen people, 500 people. It just doesn't scale. There's just not enough scale. And I think that's a bad strategy. I understand in certain contexts, maybe you're trying to reach like one or two specific people, but like, we got to be thinking a bit broader here, just in how these platforms actually work. And when you're trying to target, less than 500 people, the platforms like usually just don't deliver.
This is Ben Franklin, welcoming you to the Forecast, where we light a candle rather than curse the darkness. Each week, we highlight the people proving that progress isn't just possible, but necessary. As Poor Richard said, energy and persistence conquer all things. Now, let's get to work.
Today on the Forecast, we're following up on what's become one of our most talked about episodes, our deep dive into digital ad waste with Myles Bugbee. Joining me today is someone I've known for a very long time. We worked together several years ago at my old firm, Revolution Messaging, the olden days when we were crisscrossing the country, helping Democrats figure out digital before digital even knew what it wanted to be. Right about that period when we all, like right after we called it new media, actually. Dan Pino has spent more than a decade helping Democrats win smarter with stints at Pete for America, Assemble, Blueprint Interactive, Technicolor Political, and now is director at DSPolitical. He's here today to talk about where digital persuasion is headed and his take on ad waste. Hopefully, we'll also get a chance to talk about our glacier landing in Denali, Alaska. At one time when the client ghosted us, but the mountain didn't. Dan, welcome to your Forecast today.
Thanks for having me, Keegan. Excited to be here.
So I'm curious, since this is like, we're recording this pretty recent to a great election night for the Democrats, and you and I have known each other for a really long time. We worked together for many years and have both kept like close tabs on each other's careers. I just wanted to ask you, what sort of progress do you feel like we've made with digital since the Wild Wild West days?
Yeah, I mean, digital has matured immensely, in the 10 years that we've known, or, close to 10 years that we've known each other. We moved from a lot of kind of guesswork or estimations to a lot more data-driven precision, and, it was one of the reasons why I actually wanted to join DSPolitical, is like they've been a pioneer in this space for like a super long time. So yeah, it's like, it's no longer, I wouldn't say it's the Wild West quite, but it's maybe on like right where the Wild West ended. We're approaching true civilization, advanced civilization. There's still quite a lot to sift through, and still pretty wild out there. But it's a lot more structured, and there's a lot more things to be excited about going forward.
Well, you did a lot of great work for then Mayor. Now, do people call him Secretary Pete? I'm not sure if anybody says that.
He'll say that he still goes by, he'll always be Mayor Pete. I like to call him Secretary Mayor Pete, but a lot of people just call him Mr. Secretary, just Pete at this point, because he's just a guy. So
just a regular dude.
Yeah, just a regular dude.
So I'm curious, like I'm biased, but I'm sure you would agree with me, like great work for Pete for America. Has there been, like, were there lessons from that race that you apply to your work today?
Yeah, totally. I think one of the biggest things that I did, and really made an emphasis to do as, kind of the person who headed up the real like hands-on keyboard digital persuasion effort, was managing our vendor relationships and choosing which vendors to go with, vetting them deeply, and not just picking a single vendor who, claims they can do it all. And really, trying to collect vendors like Infinity Stones, and figure out, okay, what is, going into every conversation being like, all right, what is the one thing that you hang your hat on? If you could sell me one thing, like, what would it be? And, vetting it, maybe running a test and seeing how it held up. And then, if things worked out, okay, let's bring you in to do that one thing. And I think there's still a lot of work left in this space. People want a quick fix. They want someone who can do it all. And there's a lot of folks out there who, are sometimes not honest actors in that space. They claim they can do it all, but maybe they're really just kind of selling it because they know people will grab it.
Yeah, for sure. I do remember when I was running Bernie's ad program, every vendor wants to work with you when you're on a presidential.
Right. Everyone says that they've got the best inventory. Everyone says they can do programmatic, they can do social, they've got more reach than YouTube, some BS that, doesn't pass the smell test. But if you don't know what you should be sniffing for, then you can get kind of swindled into it a little bit. So I think that was really something that I took a lot of pride in, having spent a few years already in the space, talking with a lot of vendors, being on the agency side for a really long time at that point already. And I like to think I've got a pretty good BS indicator or BS radar as well. So, taking that and really making sure that we were getting just the best vendors that we could.
And now you're on the vendor side.
And now I'm on the vendor side, and happy to talk about that. I think there's, obviously tons of strengths that DSPolitical has, and I'm not afraid to share what I think we are. What is our one good thing? So we do plenty of stuff, and I think we do it all really well. But I don't pretend like if you've got the capacity to shop around and pick, do the Infinity Stone collecting, then yeah, we are just another tool in your toolkit. We shouldn't necessarily be your one-stop shop, and I'm not afraid to say that. I think that is our philosophy, that we want to be a strategic partner with our clients, not someone who's just looking out for our bottom line.
So are you gonna pitch Pete if he runs again? Will you have that opportunity?
I mean, we'll pitch anybody that wants to. To be clear, any Democrat. That is one thing that sets DSPolitical apart, is that we only work with Democrats, progressives, progressive aligned organizations. We're not a vendor that plays both sides, even if if we have separate teams or anything like that. No, we only work with Democrats and progressively aligned groups. So I think that's another reason why I was like super thrilled to come over to DSPolitical.
So now 2026 is ramping up, and you weren't at this. You were at Technicolor for 2024, right? So this will be your first even year election here with DSPolitical. I'm curious, like, now that you have spent some time there with DSPolitical, and obviously you all did work in 2025 as well. Has anything changed since 2024 from your perspective?
I mean, I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily changed, but the trend has continued in CTV. I think obviously there's been a huge, huge shift in sort of all aspects of this space, that CTV is huge, both from a viewership standpoint, an inventory standpoint, an addressability standpoint. It just keeps expanding more and more, and we are just seeing more and more of our clients asking for that and asking for premium inventory, the best ways to target. And, we've spent, the last few years really building up those capabilities. So, we have some really, we work with SSPs year round to figure out, the best deals, because the amount of the scale that we do, we're able to, develop the best deals, get the best quality inventory, and be able to pass that on to our clients. And then because of that scale, we're also able to run lots of tests to make sure that what we're buying is actually good stuff. And so actually just last year in 2024, we ran a set of RCTs with the Analyst Institute through one of our major SSPs, comparing where our clients' ads delivered on CTV versus kind of the rest of political. And 6 in 10 of our CTV ads showed up on a top 25 publisher, whereas the rest of political, it was 2 in 10. So we're doing the work to ensure that you're getting the best inventory possible and still keeping our costs at a really competitive price.
That's a fascinating side. I hadn't heard about that yet. Do you feel like that premium placement is also worth a premium CPM?
Totally. I really do. I think the idea that, just getting the lowest possible CPM is a bit of an outdated way of looking at things. Sure, you're going to get more impressions, but where are those impressions showing up? Are they on actual, platforms that people are truly watching, or that they have maybe they're watching, but maybe it's not a more leaned in format, where they're selecting what they want to watch. They are like actively watching while they've selected a show, like a premium placement like Hulu or even Peacock, or even something like Tubi, where you're selecting a movie or TV show or something. You're going to be more engaged in those ad breaks that are, usually only 30 seconds long. Maybe it's 90 seconds and you get three or four 15-second ads. You're going to be more engaged during those ad breaks than you were if you're just watching, live TV of, CBS News or something like that, or whatever's available on one of those fast channels, which are hugely valuable because they do provide scale and reachability, but they might not have that premium sort of leaned in experience where the ads are just going to be more effective because people are actually paying attention.
You're talking about video a lot. I'm curious, do you think there's still a role for display?
I think there's a role, but it's certainly not what it was, when we were starting, out, and you could get, some really good placements. I think I think display is the place where there's the most amount of potential ad waste. And so I think that's where you need to be careful, the most careful. But I think it still has a place. I think there's when you can, work through PMPs, where you're getting, trusted, high quality inventory that's been vetted, that's brand safe, all that kind of stuff. And you're getting more than just, the tiny mobile banner, like, small banner ads at the bottom of a mobile app. But you're getting a mix of the larger sizes. It's a decent way to provide scale and some additional frequency, but it by no means is going to be the thing that sort of persuades someone. I think it's an aspect to raise something like name ID, or to provide some additional reach, but it shouldn't be the crux of a program typically, unless that's literally all you've got. Which I think there's a lot of times where something is better than nothing, but I'll also tell you, like, I'll be honest with you, if you come to me with a plan where I'm like, you're better off just holstering this money, like, I'm gonna tell you that.
Well, you all you still have the Democratic Ads platform, right?
We do. Yep. Democratic Ads is still available to folks. Yep.
And you might not be able to share this. That's totally fine if it's proprietary. But like I always view that as more geared towards like smaller races. Bring your own. They're not going to necessarily work with an agency or even work with with you, Dan, directly, because they're they're only spending a few $1,000s. And I always thought it was really smart that you all are doing this. You may recall back at Rev Days, we were trying to build something similar. And I just thought that there was like a long tail of like all these races that need to do this. My perspective has been like a lot of them, they're not going to have video, so they'll have display, or has that shifted a lot? And do people bring video?
I mean, I think, with the advent of 4K video on your phone, recording a 15-second ad and being able to drop in on, various like, either freemium or like small paid subscription video editing platforms where you can just drop in a watermark or something, has been able to change the ability to run something like a 15-second ad where you're just recording an iPhone video. Like, those can still be effective. And I would say that is still far more effective than just, tons of banner ads. But yeah, Democratic Ads is still available to folks. It's super, super easy to use. And yeah, we still see a lot of people using it for, if they don't have an agency and they just want to run a $500 ad campaign in their zip code or something. Totally still usable. But we also have Deploy, which is our DSP. It's a Meta DSP, Meta being multiple, not Meta.
Not
Facebook Meta, not Zuckerberg Meta, to be perfectly clear here. But Deploy is it's a Meta DSP. It sits on top of 3 DSPs: the Trade Desk, Yahoo, and Beeswax, which is like Freewheel and Comcast DSP, and that's available to anyone at. There's no minimums, there's no contracts, and it provides a lot more power than Democratic Ads, and sits on top of our Catalyst voter file that we have. So you can get up with a voter file targeted ad campaign literally the same day, as long as you have the creative. So that's been a really awesome tool that we've, we launched that I think in 2018, and we've seen just huge growth in it, and people seem to really enjoy it. It's super easy to use and people really like that.
So when like people are working with you all, like what are you doing, whether they're using Deploy or Democratic Ads, or they're working, I assume you still will work with folks on like a managed like IM.
Oh yeah, we still do managed service. We'll still do the hand in glove, soup to nuts.
Do people
campaign
come like
planning and buying?
You've been talking to some folks. Myles is obviously on a previous episode and was talking about like what he's trying to do to combat waste. And there is like another people I've talked to like that are in the media buying space. They feel like there is a movement toward like the customer. In this case, customer usually is like a Democratic committee or campaign being more concerned about waste than ever before. I would argue that everybody's worried about money right now, and that is actually, it's not like some sort of like we really all of a sudden care about this. It's more people are like, where can I shave off some bucks on my budget?
Yeah,
but it seems like people are talking more about it. So like when people come to you and they ask you like about ad waste, what do you usually say?
Well, I think there's a couple things that I want to address about this conversation. Number one, from your conversation with Myles, I really respect Myles. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him in person, but I've seen a lot of his work and stuff, and obviously heard his conversation and agreed with the vast majority of what he said. I think there's one thing that I would disagree with, and this isn't me coming from actually wearing my DSPolitical hat. This is me wearing all of my agency and campaign hats about the conversation as it relates to ad waste, in that running through vendors or a media buying shop, as opposed to building something in house. And I think his point, and maybe I took it wrong or anything, but I think the point he was making is that everyone should aim towards building in house, because you can eliminate some of those fees and things like that come with running through a managed service or running through a vendor. And I think that's like, ideally, like yes, I think in an ideal world, if everyone could do that, that would be great. But I think in reality, there's a host of problems with that. Is that there's just not enough people out there to run those programs. There's not enough expertise, and that's a pipeline issue, obviously. And with the ebbs and flows of both the political cycles, but also say for like a progressively aligned nonprofit or something like that, if their funding runs dry, then are they going to have money to keep on a paid media expert with salary and benefits and like all those kinds of things, and not be spending money on ads? When you go through a vendor, whether it's us or any of the host of good vendors that are out there that run a full managed service, you're getting that security of having a team when you need it who is also experts in what they're doing. And so I think we're underestimating the value of that when, say, for example, if you were to work with us, whether that's through Deploy or through managed service, you're getting, usually it's like myself or one of my counterparts. You're getting a media planner who's been doing this for years. You're getting a trader who's actually trading within the platforms, and then you're getting a customer service expert who's working with you on the day-to-day, providing you updates and everything like that. On top of that, you're getting all of the benefits that we've worked through that I've already kind of mentioned, like all of our inventory benefits, that where we've worked with SSPs to make sure that your inventory is the best inventory available, brand safe, et cetera, and any custom builds for audiences that you're getting so much value that you would not be able to replicate in-house, or you would have to spend, 2+ years to try to replicate. And even then you might not be able to. So I think there's a ton of value in being able to go to a vendor and say like, hey, I want to be able to do this. But I also get where Myles is coming from in that, like, ideally, yeah, I think in an ideal world, everyone is a ads expert who can build their own campaigns and optimize them and run them and all that kind of stuff. But, most of the time you probably don't want your, a 23-year-old, maybe in their first or second job, running a multi-million-dollar ad program. You probably want to leave that to someone who's been doing it for a while. So I think there's value in that. That aside, when it comes to the, go ahead.
I was going to say, what could possibly go wrong with having a 20-year-old manage multi-million-dollar?
So many things.
And like you like if I'm hearing you correctly, I just want to make sure I'm capturing what I feel like you're getting at, is that there is value that you should pay for in having that experience help, right? Like, and that doesn't have to necessarily be DSPolitical, be working with like from the agency side. This thing I would say all the time, like, yeah, you could go and buy the ads yourself on Facebook, and like, great, go for it. Obviously, anybody can start like an ads account on Facebook, but there's a lot of stuff that makes it more complicated, that it is useful to have someone working with you that did it before.
Yeah, totally. And so, as someone who's had to be in kind of all situations, whether it's building an in-house team, working with managed service vendors, or kind of in between, it totally depends on the people that have the resources, the patience to build that sort of in-house team. And there's plenty of firms out there who have done that. I'm not going to name drop folks, but like there are firms out there who have spent years building in-house media buying teams who do it really, really well. And there are others who they have the relationships, they have the skill to do maybe the creative or the script writing, the consulting, all that kind of stuff, and just maybe don't have the capacity to run a full in-house media buying program or operation, because that's a ton of overhead that you got to think about. That's a lot of contracts you got to deal with, not to mention obviously your employees and making sure that they're taken care of. And on top of that, there's a ton of turnover in this space. So if you hire a 23, 25, 30-year-old, who's to say that they're not going to go off to another place and take everything that you spent with them somewhere else? And then if you didn't do the time to be able to train the next crop, then you could be up Schitt's Creek. So having that backup, having that partner who you trust, who is not just looking out for their bottom line, who can do all of those things, can be super valuable and actually be a money saver.
So I think about like the TV advertising model. When I part of the reason why I even got into media buying was many, many decades ago when I was in college. I took this class called Campaign Management Institute at American University. If anybody who's listening, if they like want to learn about running campaigns, it's an amazing 2-week intensive class that anybody could register for. GW has a whole master's program for it too, which I always like was shocked that they were able to turn that into a master's program. But that's a little bit of my AU bias showing through here. I remember, and this is before digital really, or new media even existed. This is not to date myself, but there was a whole session on like media buying, and they had like a media buyer going through the work that they do for placing TV, radio, outdoor ads, stuff like that. And I remember being like, people get paid for doing this? Wow. And like learning about how much money they make, like placing millions of dollars of TV ads. And I was just like, wow, this is like an amazing career. I want to this is like look into it. And then a few years later, I ended up becoming a media buyer. It was like kind of a wild like story of young Keegan discovering his dreams of media buying that we'll save for another episode. But the reason why I bring that up is because there's been like a standard for like a long time, and I have no idea who set the standard. I assume it was the TV consultants, but it used to be like, you would go and you'd hire a media consultant, and they're the ones who are going to really help with your broader media strategy. And they would work with people to produce the media and work with buyers to place it. And that was like a common model in politics for a long time. And what came out of it was like usually a media buyer would be like 2 or 3% for larger buys. If they had like an established relationship, there would be like you maybe some other discounts up to maybe like 5%, right, of the buy. And I felt like that became very standard. And then digital came along, and it became, going back to my Wild Wild West comment at the beginning of this, like it became much more unclear. All of a sudden it became, like at Rev, we were usually charging 10 to 15%. Sometimes we would cut deals with other firms that were back ending where we would only charge 5 and then they would take 10. So the total was 15. And it varies. But like generally speaking, throughout the media world, it still is very driven by commission when you're working with an agency or a consultant. But there's no standard, right? Like everybody can do whatever they want. And we like in my previous life at agencies, we would constantly be up against people who were like, well, I'm only charging 2%, but then they were working with like someone else doing the buying.
Sure. Yeah.
Who was charging whatever percent, and then they were just adding 2 on top of that.
Right.
I'm wondering, you know all this context. I'm sharing this context with listeners, but I'm like wondering, as you're talking about this value in in expertise, which I agree is very important. Who gets to determine like what that value is worth, right? Like what like, and you might, I don't know if anybody has an answer for this, but like that's what I'm like really interested in getting into with folks is like, how do we determine what like the market rate is and who should determine that?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. My biggest thing when it comes to that is people should be transparent about how, if they're subbing out, if they're working with a vendor and they're claiming that they're taking 2%, they're only taking 2%, but on their media plans, they're not showing that they're working with, a DSPolitical or someone else, and factoring that in. I personally think that's a bit disingenuous. I think folks should absolutely be transparent about who they're working with, what vendors they sub out to, and what their cut is, like what they are taking on top of whatever they're sending over to the vendor. So, in terms of who determines how valuable that expertise is, I think that's a tough question because you're obviously going to have a wide variety of knowledge when it comes to who the ultimate end client is, whether that's a campaign, a pack, or something like that. Some campaigns and packs have their own paid media experts who know what they're doing. They've run paid media programs themselves, so they can say like, oh, this commission doesn't make sense, this is a wild CPM or whatever. And whether that's us or if it's someone who's subbing out to us or another vendor, I think it's on them to justify, hey, this is why I'm doing it this way, because I don't have the capacity, or I don't have I don't have a seat on trade desk that costs X amount of dollars a quarter or year or something. And so being able to just be transparent about it and justify their costs and their commissions, I think is important. But then again, you also have other campaigns that don't know what to ask for, and I think that comes down to campaigns getting a bit more educated, and the folks, and you're starting to see it now with a younger crop of operatives out in the field who are running their campaign managers, their senior advisors who have been in this space now long enough that they understand digital paid media and can spot things that look fishy. But we still have a lot of work to do in terms of educating folks who are coming up, making sure that they know what a CPM is. Little things like that, like we sort of take for granted as people in this space. But being able to look at a media plan and understand what it's saying, without having someone like necessarily need to explain it to you, is hugely valuable. Really, where it sort of begins in terms of this, like, how do we determine the value then of, a vendor or whomever, is like, we got to have literacy on one end. And that's one thing that actually like we do at DSPolitical. Like we provide lots of resources, we provide ebooks, we provide trainings. We want to make sure that people know what to ask for, and we welcome those like tough questions.
There's this platform, War Chest. Are you familiar with it? They do like budgeting, and I always thought it was like a really good idea because like most folks that are like managing campaigns are not like trained in business school and like understand how to like create budgets right out of college.
I'm familiar with War Chest because of my wife, who runs a compliance firm.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so you would definitely be familiar. And maybe this is them that needs to do this. So I know a couple people work there, so maybe I'll just tell them this later, share this episode. But I know you mentioned the DSPolitical educates as well here, but there does seem to be a broader like folks need to understand what goes into like all of this and
Totally.
And like help you with the budgeting. I don't think War Chest really helps with like media budgets, does it? More
I don't believe so. As far as I know, and this might need to get cut, but as far as I know, it's basically just a way for the committees to make sure that you don't have too high a burn rate and you're not spending shit too poorly.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, and which I think is really critical, and also like there's
yeah.
So, this is what
it's
like,
a little big brothery too, but
for sure,
it's a lot of times necessary.
I mean, I've definitely like from the vendor side, I'm sure you appreciate this. Like, I don't know how much you all go on credit for like these campaigns.
Mhm.
I've definitely been there where
Yeah.
I've spent media for political campaigns and they can't pay the bill and I'm on their debt,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that what is what like to go back to your point on like their value in experience. There's also a lot of value in being able to extend credit. I remember having this
Yeah.
conversation with a TV consultant back in the Bernie days about like
Mhm.
what's the right amount commission and like this person was sort of making the argument to me, well, because we're taking on all the risk when it comes to paying this stuff, we actually should get the most money because we're like the ones. And I was like, I hear you, but also like no one's asking you to take that risk. Like you can
Right.
take prepay.
It's like you're not wrong, but you're also not right.
So I agree with you though that like having more education and more transparency is beneficial. I think it's
Also
hard.
helps with the paid media pipeline too. If we want to talk about building more in-house capacity for places, and that's a great place to start too, is just making sure that more people are educated about it, more well-rounded. Because I don't think a lot of people realize like that there's a lot of opportunity in this space. There's every campaign spends money, guys. Like, and while there's other stuff that's hugely important, field. I mean, every aspect of a campaign is important, to be clear. And
Except for
but
research.
like, field, whether it's field or comms or something like that, like, there's always going to be a need for folks who understand paid media and who are maybe looking at things from a different way, who come with a different set of experiences. If you're younger, you've experienced media in a wholly different way even than I have, who's been in this space for 10 years. It's and I welcome those younger people who want to come in with a fresh perspective, unlike many of the other people in the paid media space who refuse to think differently.
Who are those
I,
people, Dan?
Largely people who say you should be spending 1,000 points of 1,000 points on TV,
Yeah.
a broadcast TV a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone who's still saying that, let's rethink us hiring those people if that's their baseline and they're not doing any critical thinking about it.
This reminds me, I'm wandering a little bit, but I should ask you this while we're talking because I haven't asked you this in a long time. Do you think that having it's TRPs, right? Like for those who don't know what points are, gross rating
Yeah.
points. In digital, there isn't really the closest one-to-one to that is TRPs, target rating points. And like Google does a lot of this with YouTube. They'll like use their planner for like what the TRP equivalent is. I used to debate this with John at Trilogy, who runs the buying there a lot. Like, is it better to adopt the points model for digital, or is it better to be like points are garbage, stop caring about points?
I'm always going to lean points are garbage. I think it's just a really outdated, antiquated way to think about these things, just because it's all modeled anyway, and that's where I think a lot of it's funny because obviously you and I have dealt with this for most of our careers, having whether it's TV buyers or the campaigns themselves kind of constantly have to have us justify our plans and our spend and things like that, simply because there's more data available to us on how our things are going to reach people and spend, what the costs are, and click-through rates, video completion rate, et cetera, et cetera. There's no equivalent on the TV side. It's just GRPs, basically. Sure, there might be a handful of other things available, but not nearly to the degree that is available on digital. And so that becomes a double-edged sword for us, where because there's more data available, we have to then justify everything even more. Whereas, for TV, you know, you're just like, oh, the standard, 1,000 GRPs is going to get us 10, a 10 frequency to everybody, when obviously that's not how it works anymore. So I think that's why I can't do points.
It always bothered me as well. It's just that, like, especially if you like get really in the weeds on like the data that calculates, like, you'll pull, like, if you work with a TV buyer on like, I want to reach 40 and older in this congressional district, and they'll give you like the the average viewership, like what you can expect for gross ratings on broadcast. I'm like, bullshit. Like, there is no way 90% of the district is watching broadcast. That is impossible. And they're like, well, according to Nielsen it is. I'm like, Nielsen's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
I might cut.
Yeah, 90% of the district is watching, Jeopardy or The Bachelor or something.
Yeah,
It's
they're
like,
not.
no,
like, absolutely.
no.
Like, even live, I mean, a lot of them are watching live sports for sure. I will agree that, like, if you're going after the type of person who
That's
watches
where
live sports,
I think that's where TV is. And this, to be clear, I don't think anyone should be like should never do TV. Like, that is not like we should be doing an all of the above approach here. And I think there's a couple campaigns that we can look at just from last week, or these 2025 elections, that we can look at as really great examples of doing that all the above approach. Like, I think Zoran's campaign was really smart in how they obviously had a lot of they had a lot of momentum behind them. They actually didn't have to spend quite as much on digital because of his organic reach. But that also that frees you up to then do the kind of interesting TV buying that they did. I actually thought the fact that they were able to cut a Survivor specific ad, a Bachelor specific, that's an interesting, a Knicks specific ad. Those are really interesting ways to do TV that, obviously the vast majority of campaigns are not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to cut 6 different ads that are only going to run one time, or maybe twice. But I think that is a level of innovative thinking that TV buyers can take, and then being able to run their organic digital, but even just take that organic digital and run it as paid media as well is hugely powerful for them because their organic was so good. So,
well, going back to your education point, just quick pitch for you all, or anybody else who's listening wants to do this. Like, I do feel like it's missing that there's Facebook has their blueprint, Google AdWords has their certification. There isn't really a great, that I'm aware of, media buying institute. Great opportunity for you all to run this. You could train a bunch of people on using Deploy and have an army out there that is educated and likes working with you all. I there is not enough education in this space. It really is for most trial and error. And a lot of people I talked to, they got into the same way I did, we're just oh yeah, sure, we can totally do that, and figure it out as we went. And I'm lucky that I did so many things. I felt like I learned a lot, but there was no formal education other than trying to study what vendors would share with me. And all the vendors are always going to be pushing their one tool.
Right. No, totally. I think this is honestly a space where I'm surprised that there hasn't been more of this from, the arenas, or, I think they're now part of Zinc Collective. So DigiDems and Democratic Training Committee, however you think of them, that is ostensibly their role here, or any of these other kind of organizations that their claim is that they're training the next, set of operatives. I've yet to see really extensive media training or media buying trainings from these groups. And I wonder if it's maybe there's just lack of interest, totally possible, and they've thought about it. But, the most that I typically see are just kind of panel discussions. And, I think, Netroots is another great opportunity for that, as that actually is kind of a place where, it's a mix of sort of panels and trainings. So I think there's definitely an opportunity here. And I think what we need is folks really asking for it. It's going to these groups, raising their hands and saying, hey, I want to learn this. Where do I go? And then, we can get a group of us, whether it's a mix of vendors and agencies and just other experts in this space, get them all together and say hey, we're all working together here. We all have the same goal. We obviously have different tools that you can use. And the beauty of this is that when you learn, you can then decide for yourself which you think is the best tool for you. And I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, I think cross vendor would make sense, especially because then you could get a lot of people to contribute to the cost. I mean, good luck getting Meta to pay for anything when it comes to politics.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be clear, you shouldn't be using Meta for persuasion anyway. There's a tepid take for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that at all. I am curious, since we're talking platform specific, and YouTube gets brought up so much now in
Sure.
plans, and I know
As it should. As it should.
there are folks that formerly would have been like in the, you need to buy 1,000 points of broadcast crowd now that have like fully embraced like YouTube, but they like don't want to see, they don't want to really see a media plan that's much else than YouTube.
Yeah.
How do you all, like, I'm curious, like, I've never asked you this, when you're going out and selling DSPolitical, how are you trying to integrate with folks like that?
For me, because I come from the agency side where I've had to deal with, all kinds of, whether it's like clients and just like all different kinds of vendors and all that kind of stuff, like my philosophy is that you should be just like how you should, in a broader sense, be running an all of the above approach when it comes to paid media. When it comes to digital paid media specifically, you should also be running an all the above approach. There is absolutely a huge need to run YouTube. Like Democrats should be spending a huge amounts of money on YouTube. And it's nice to finally see us doing that. Like really, like last year, I think was really where we sort of turned the corner and like truly embraced YouTube. It's a hugely important platform that is, I like to call it the broadcast TV of the internet. But that's exactly what it is. It has huge reach, huge scale, but it does have limitations in its targeting capabilities. And so yes, you should kind of start there, but you should also integrate, we firmly believe, and I personally firmly believe, that you should have voter file one-to-one targeting in your media plans. When you've decided like, hey, these are the people that we need to move, whether that's based on a demographic or that's based on a low turnout voter, like something like that, you can't do that on YouTube without simply just doing approximations. Whereas, for us at DSPolitical, we sit on top of the Catalyst voter file. You can go in, you can cut your own list and target those audiences one-to-one across all of their devices programmatically on the same day. And I think that's a really important aspect of any media plan. Should it be the only thing that you're doing? Probably not. And I'll be the first to tell you that. We should have an all of the above approach. And but let's not get into this war in the digital space that I feel like we've had with TV firms over the last decade, where now we're saying the only thing we should be doing is YouTube or geo-based targeting, or other folks are saying we should only be doing voter file targeting. Like, I think they're both wrong. You've got to be doing both.
I'm a big fan of incremental reach. So however you can make the point that you're adding and not subtracting. Do folks ever come to you all and like focus just on like exclusion with you? That was one thing I always wanted to do more of, and I felt like it was harder to sell. Whereas I'm like, because you're like with one-to-one voter targeting, I agree, it is valuable, and also I feel like sometimes Democratic campaigns are too hyper targeted. They're like,
yes,
we only need to talk to single moms that have 3 kids and live like in the exurbs, and I'm like, okay, well, that's 500 people in your target audience.
No, we have a like micro targeting limit. Like your list needs to be at least 5,000 people. We will not do lists of, a dozen people, 500 people. Like it just doesn't scale. There's just not enough scale. And I think that's a bad strategy. I understand in certain contexts, maybe you're trying to reach like 1 or 2 specific people, but we got to be thinking a bit broader here, just in how these platforms actually work. And when you're trying to target, less than 500 people, the platforms usually just don't deliver, because they're like, why the fuck are you doing this? Sorry, I don't know if I can say the F.
No, I already cursed a couple times, so we're good. We'll keep it.
So, when it comes to exclusions, we don't get, personally, I haven't had a lot of folks come to me for that. We have, I have had to sort of walk people off the ledge of trying to target something wildly small that just won't scale, and walk them through, hey, this is why this isn't going to work. And then on top of that, you end up paying more to your CPMs skyrocket when you try to scale that small. So it's just the vast, 98% of the time, it's not worth it, and usually doesn't even work. So that's why we have that 5,000 person minimum, in order to really make sure that we can deliver on our forecasts, on what we're saying, and and make sure that you're still getting value out of your ads.
Well, speaking of scale, I want to close at a glacial scale.
Yeah.
only because I teased it in the intro and I want to share the story because I think it's a fun story that you and I shared. Ann and I, when we were working together, we ended up having this opportunity to meet with a client for a meeting in Anchorage, Alaska. And so we took the very long journey from DC to Anchorage, and Dan came, like you had already done work in Alaska for the Senate race.
Baggage in 2014 to age myself a tiny bit.
It's okay. I talked about like pre-digital terms, so I think you're okay there. But we ended up in Anchorage and our client canceled.
Yeah. Well, I think we did get to meet with some of his team.
Yes.
But the person we were actually supposed to meet with, who was the decision maker,
and it was like,
canceling.
I don't remember his name anymore. Actually, I don't know if you do, but we don't.
I do, but I'm not going to drop it.
Yeah, okay. So you remember? I was trying to think about it. I'm like, I don't even remember who it was now. I remember there was like a legitimate excuse with like his partner or spouse. Someone was like,
yeah,
or something had happened, right? So these things happen.
Yeah, no, it wasn't just like blow us off, but
talk about making the best out of a situation. We all of a sudden have free time, so we went on a seaplane and landed at Denali, which I think about quite a lot. And your picture is on my Roku TV, which I like. I love Roku for a number of reasons, but the biggest one is I love like their photo stream, and like all my TVs have like all those Roku TVs in my house have like the same collection of photos. One of which is you standing with our old hoodie in front of the seaplane in the glacier, which is a really great ad for an agency that doesn't exist anymore. But like,
right.
It was an amazing time. And so I wanted to ask you one more question on the glacier front. What would you describe digital buying as a landscape if you had to choose between different terrain? Glacier, swamp, desert, jungle, grasslands. What else am I missing?
Forest.
Forest.
But I guess that's jungle and forest are kind of similar. I would say it's a jungle. There's a lot out there. And if you've got a good guide, you can get through it. But, even then you're probably going to come up across some pretty wild, pretty weird stuff, and you got to know how to handle it. And so hopefully you have someone who has maybe been in there for a little while. Robin Williams in Jumanji level. Not saying what year is it,
have a machete to like slice through
but you're getting through, where you're going, and they're not surprised by anything that comes up.
Well, Dan, thank you for joining. I'm curious if there's anything else like coming out soon that you're looking forward to in the digital ad world that you want to mention before we close out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like our work at DSPolitical is really great. I know there's people in the space have a lot of thoughts about us, but hopefully, I've been able to talk through a little bit about how we work at DSPolitical and how I work specifically at DSPolitical, and hopefully that's made people interested or rethink some thoughts about us. And would just encourage folks to reach out to me if they have any other questions just about digital media buying broadly, but also obviously DSPolitical. And then we've got lots of stuff coming up. We're always making improvements to our platforms and our offerings. We've just revamped our digital audio offering, which is huge. That's been a big place of growth just in the space. I think that's probably just behind CTV, going back to your question about, kind of the biggest changes. That's it.
So really, if they need a guide, a jungle guide, what's the best way?
Shoot me an email, dpino, Pino, @dspolitical.com. Thanks for having me, Keegan.